Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, IronRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a coach. I do powerlifting, Highland Games, amongst other things. Run the Barbell Open, which is in the end of the bench press week, going into the final week, which is deadlifting. So.
This is John Mike. I'm an assistant professor in exercise science. We just started our first week of classes this past week, and and my hobbies include taking up a lot of space and taking up even more space whenever I have to travel on an airplane. So
always a challenge.
Right.
This is MC Powers. I'm a collegiate strength and conditioning coach, former distance runner, and turned weightlifter.
I love it. That's one of the best things about having you on is you've seen the light.
Yes, I have.
All right, I have a little bit of news, everyone. Once we get through some Iron Radio news and some science news and stuff, we had MC come back on the show. If we keep doing this, she'll be like a co-host. But to talk about different certifications. She and I were talking just a week or two ago about how different some of her certifications were, and it started occurring to me that some of these things might be more applicable for self-improvement. And John, I know you and I have talked a ton about different certifications, and you know more about a lot of the strength ones even than I do. But so after the break, we're going to talk about certifications for personal progress, right? Not just to train other people, but could these make you a better lifter, power lifter, strongman, whatever? And we'll talk about that. In the news here, a couple quick things.
Strength and muscle sport news.
I have not written anything for T-Nation for years, but I wrote something. I like Chris Shugart a lot. He's the content officer there now. And
cool.
they asked us, would you want your own child to participate in bodybuilding or physique sports? And so they had different people just write little blurbs, and I took kind of a middle path, with the right kind of guidance and that kind of thing. But there's also a lot of, frankly, superficiality and even deviance in physique sports and that kind of stuff. But I was curious about you, Phil. I mean, I'm going to ask, I could ask all of you guys. I mean, Phil, you're the only parent, but how would you respond to that? Would you want your own child to compete in physique sports?
That's tough.
It is.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, it depends on who's guiding them and, I guess where they're competing and everything else. I mean,
yeah.
Because, man, it's been, having worked in that field first, it scares me because I know the amount of eating disorders and everything.
Yep.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So it would have to be a slow, learned process.
Right.
So,
yeah. Some people, I think they like the dramatic. Sometimes you'll get like the pro bodybuilder or somebody come on and they'll try to say something dramatic. Or I think like T.C. Lou almost said, "Hell no," F no, and it's kind of funny. But at the same time, like I really had to think about that with Logan. Logan is lean and muscular. He's not heavily built. He doesn't train a ton. But I never took him to my bodybuilding shows when I competed. He was welcome to go if he showed a lot of interest, but I wasn't going to drag him there. Because there's a little bit of weirdness going on there. With the primping and the almost theater components. And there's nothing wrong with theater, but like you said, Phil, some of the eating disorders, the politics gets a little ugly. And frankly, some of that stuff is just really deviant. I mean, many episodes ago, listeners, you can go listen. I talk about some of my personal experiences at these things during that last round that I competed. MC may not go listen to those because it's going to shatter your image of me, but it was very freaky. But anyway, so I thought that'd be that'd be fun to talk about. Now, MC, you're more like collegiate and all that sort of thing. What would your thought be about when you have a girl or a boy? And I know you have a little experience maybe with the physique competition, but what do you think about that?
You know, and I've never competed in that. I've never tried or anything, but I do have a couple friends that were interns with us in the weight room that have been competing, and the part for me that I think I would say no if I had a child for that, at least just because my thought is that I see how much it changes their social life, and
that's a really good point. Yeah,
it just changes. It makes your social life really difficult. So one of my friends her show was getting closer, and she was just like, I can't go out with my friends. Like, I can't go out to eat because I'm not going to eat anything. And then everyone's like, oh, you should eat. And it's just, she's like, I just feel like I can't do anything with my friends. And so that to me, like, and it's a choice, and it's something that she really enjoys doing, and she's pretty good at it. So it's hard because, and you could say that other sports are like that. Like when I was in high school, I made some sacrifices for cross-country meets. Like maybe I wasn't going to go to a football game late on Friday because I ran at 7 a.m. But you could say the same thing, but I think it's just more dramatic with that sport. Yeah. From my personal experience, I just think it's a little much.
It is more all-consuming in a lot of ways.
Yes,
you know.
That's my thing.
John, let me pose it to you this way. I mean, if you had a young man, if you had, let's say a late teen years son, would you have any trepidation getting him into strongman or something? I mean, because that's a different ball of wax.
Yeah, it is. That's a really good question. And I would probably have to wait to see if they even have any interest in it at all. I mean, if they don't even have any interest, then it's probably not a good idea to really push them to do those types of things. But I wouldn't be opposed to have them just come watch, like check it out if they continue to have interest as they get older. If they want to get into lifting and strength, then we can go from there. But it's funny about the social aspect, because I don't think that you get as much deviance with powerlifting and strongman as you do like physique sports and bodybuilding.
No, the Highland Games guys are some of the most fun, loosest, like, let's drink beer while we do this shit.
Exactly.
You know
I mean? They are. Yeah, they are.
Very different.
That's different.
Yeah, I think you do have some like deviance with powerlifting or strongman or Highland Games, but it's just with bodybuilding and physique sports, it's just a couple levels higher. But yeah, it's a good question. It's really hard to answer because I know some guys that do powerlifting and strongman that have kids that their kids don't. I mean, they'll go to the contest, but they don't really have much interest in trying it or doing it. I mean, that's every child. I think is just different.
It's true. I have a small percentage of students who they're sort of like closet physique interested. I really think it's something that calls to some people or not, but it's not really that in vogue to do physique stuff, and I think the risk is largely that it directly links your body shape and image to self-worth, and the strength sports don't do that. Nobody cares how you look. I mean, maybe on some level you want to be broad shoulders and look muscular, not just be a big fat beanbag chair, as a power lifter, let's say, but yeah, it's not directly related like that. So,
yeah,
but I think, Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Real quick, that's just where I think that socially for females, I think that makes that sport way more difficult. So if I had a daughter, I would be much more concerned, just because, like you said, it's putting the way you look is linked to your success and like your rating or your score, and that's where I see the issue. If you're at a young enough and more impressionable age, that could be a problem.
It could be hurtful.
Yeah, I think another problem that a lot of people have, and I really try as best as I can to even tell a lot of my students nowadays. It's not the finding of information. It's just all the filtering of all the BS that makes it really difficult. Which makes it really difficult to just educate yourself and educate. I don't want to say educate the masses, but it's just the filtering of all the information, because there's so much of it and there's so much coming from so many different types of individuals. So I would say the person really needs to get educating. It just comes back to what you said, MC and Phil, is just being around good quality mentors. And people that are like really, really experienced, not people that did 2 freaking contests and they do online coaching and like they're so experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's elements too, because it almost becomes a popularity contest. You'll hear some of the figure and fitness competitors talk about, well, I wasn't part of the clique that some of the main judges trained, like the girls that they trained, or the contest promoter, is, and then it's like, oh man, now it becomes even more drama and hurtful. And so I agree. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that mentor type thing, you don't learn that in a textbook. You got to live through that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, my daughter has competed since she was 5. She did her first sanctioned weightlifting meet or powerlifting meet when she was awesome.
6. And I have no problem with them doing that if they want,
Right.
But it's a totally different atmosphere. I mean, honestly, like you said, it's less, it's more team building than the other. You aren't individualized. You aren't like stuck. You have a bunch of people doing it with you. You're not doing your diet, and now you're socially, awkward.
Yeah.
So
sometimes I find myself, I would suspect that I'm a little bit like deviant, or looked at with a little bit of deviance, because I'm literally like the biggest faculty member on campus.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And it's just like, I look like, it's funny because last fall, when I first started, like before I started training at the gym I go to now, I was training in the weight room on campus, and like some students, before I knew they were in my class, they came up to me and asked me some questions, or like they thought I was on the football team because I was lifting a bunch of weight and stuff, and like, no, I'm a faculty member. So it's just like,
Right.
I mean, it's just weird, but that's kind of social deviant as well, because literally
That's
you don't
true.
you don't find, I mean, Lana, you've been through this too. It's like, I mean, oh, you're a nutrition professor, like you're real lean and you work out, it's just not the norm. But I'm okay with that, and I think a lot of people just need to be okay with that. It just comes with maturity and security. So
Right on.
Anyway,
Okay. Let me run down this list of news tidbits, and then we can go to break, and we'll talk about the certifications here. I haven't done this in the past, but I'm going to toss this out. If anybody's interested in seeing some talks that I think a lot of our listeners will be interested in this, the American Society of Exercise Physiologists is going to join forces with the Research Club on my campus. And October 21st and 22nd, we're going to have a conference, and it's Alliance, Ohio. If you're interested, you can contact me through IronRadio.org. I know we have some people in a driving distance kind of thing, but the ASEP and Research Club meeting, there's a theme that is basically foods, supplements, training, and mental health. So it might surprise some of our listeners. Like some people, they have anxiety or depression problems, and medications aren't giving them exactly what they want. And believe it or not, there's some research that adding creatine to that mix, now suddenly some people respond to the antidepressant meds better, right? Or how far can exercise go to alleviating mild depression or moderate depression? So there's a lot of mental health stuff, and a lot. There'll be dietary supplement talk and sports nutrition talk, and so again, anybody's interested, you can follow up through IronRadio.org. Oh, and one more thing before I get to, I'm going to shotgun a few headlines to you, but before I do that, I think you guys might find this funny. Just yesterday, I was listening to Science Friday, because, I like that stuff, and Ira Flato was interviewing a woman about doping in sports, okay? And now this gets kind of, because, I know why you're laughing, John, because, like, the Gen Pop has no idea, right? And so this lady, her name was Maggie Baker, and she said, I just want to throw out, the most dramatic tale I've ever heard of, the largest use of anabolic steroids in history. And I'm like, okay, you got my attention. Like, who is this individual and what happened to him? And, what are you going to say about him? And here's what she said. This individual took 12,000 milligrams or 12 grams total anabolic steroids over the course of a 12-month period. I'm like, and I'm thinking, okay, amateur guys now take like 3 grams a week, week, and 12 grams a year, she told, the world was the highest ever. Maybe recorded. Maybe that's where she's getting at, like actually documented. But 12 grams in a year. I'm like, I'm sure there are some people, and there are probably some listeners to the podcast itself who, know people who have taken 12 grams in a month. Right. Not a year. And you know what? And that's the shame of it. I think Phil and I talked about this years in the past, but, back in the day, like in the 80s and 90s, a lot of stuff was measured in like 250 milligram or 500 milligram amounts, like preloaded stuff or ampules or whatever. So you're talking about quarter gram, half gram. And I used to say to people, like I'd go to some big events and they'd say, oh, I'm gramming it. And I'd say, so you measure protein in grams, not androgens, that's milligrams, And then over time, unfortunately, and make no mistake, I mean, somebody who takes 250 milligrams of mixed testosterone esters, they are going to change. I mean, every week they're going to change. They're going to recover. They're going to grow. There's going to be a lot of stuff happening there. And unfortunately, I think things have escalated at the pro level that there's sort of a trickle down attitude where you get a lot of young guys. They won't even fool around with those sorts of doses anymore. Anything near clinical. It's either 3 grams or don't waste your time.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of people. It's like, well, you need to take a gram per every 100 pounds of body weight. I'm like,
oh my god,
what? Holy shit! I mean, if you're a pro bodybuilder or powerlifter or even strongman, I'm not going to say I agree, but I can see where certainly because of the heavier loading and recovery, like that could certainly be more like legit. But I've also heard people say they're on like TRT. And testosterone replacement therapy, and they're taking like 250 milligrams. I'm like, in some aspects, yes, that's fine, but in more cases than not, that's typically a cycle.
Yeah, I agree. I agree because average testosterone production, I think, from natural, gonadal production is something like 70 milligrams a week or something like that. So if you're taking 250, that's a cycle. Now you're on a cycle. But
you're talking like 12. What was it, like 12 grams a year?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's a gram a month. God, I gotta lay down.
I know, right? Highest recorded in history, she said, and I'm just like, oh, honey.
What did the rest of the? What did they comment on the rest of the Science Friday say? Like, did they say she was incorrect?
No, because I think to the general population, that's a ridiculous amount. They said that was the amount in an entire stable full of cows or something like that. They're having dramatic statements,
Yeah.
And she said, of course, he went into liver failure like a year later or something. And it's a typical, it's not exactly evidence-based kind of drama. And that was unfortunate to me because Science Friday, I expect something a little more evidence-based. Now, I'm not saying this didn't happen, and she may indeed be right. That for the Olympic Games, maybe that's the highest recorded ever abuse. But I was laughing out loud sitting there in my office at work because we all know those days are gone. I mean, 12 grams over the course of a year, that's comical. I'm not saying that's not a lot. My God, it's ridiculous. Like we were saying, John, I mean, a quarter gram a week is enough to change someone significantly.
Uh-huh.
I mean, but anyway. Okay. I was actually going to make a crack about MC's heavy use, but I don't want her to get fired. But for the record,
well,
MC
thanks.
is clean. She's clean.
Okay. Thanks. If you watch me lift or anything, I'm sure you can figure that out, too.
Okay. A few quick blurbs. I have pointed people to the Institute of Food Technologists before. They have a wellness letter, so it's ift.org wellness letter. Let me just share a couple of these things, and you can easily Google IFT wellness newsletter and follow up. But here are some of the shotgun guidelines from this. 1, FDA delays salt guidelines. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has announced that it is extending the comment period for its sodium draft guidelines, which were issued in June. to me, this sounds like politics. You get the companies that sell highly sodium-rich, salty foods, and they just delay. It's like the Sugar Refiners Association. Oh, sugar's great. Now they're, oh no, let's wait and take a closer look at salt. And I'm being jaded here, but so they're delaying the salt guidelines from coming out. A couple other things here. I thought this was curious. Freeze-dried vegetable powders may enhance the quality of meat products. A study published in the Journal of Food Science evaluates the chemical composition of 4 different freeze-dried veggie powders and how they're mixing it into things like sausages and meats. Imagine, so now you're getting your veggies when you just eat your meat. So I think that's interesting because I do pretty good on the meat side of things, and I admit I do not eat enough vegetables. Like my wife is great. Fruits, vegetables all day long. And I don't do that enough. I mean, I eat way more than the average American, I think. But it'd be nice just to powder it up and throw it in my meat. How about that?
I've been eating more salad the last several months than I have probably the last several years. It's good. That's a good point. Well, anyway.
Further stuff, a new device may help lower the fat and sugar content in food formulations, says a study presented at the 252nd National Meeting and Expo of the ACS, right, the American Chemical Society, shows that a new device may be able to help food manufacturers create delicious foods with much less sugar, fat, and salt. I wonder how that works. But anyway,
not sold.
Yeah, people can follow up on that. Yeah, the food industry's done that before, haven't they? Or they've tried. Yeah, not always successful.
How healthy is that solution, though, is the question.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, they've tried to do that before with low-fat peanut butter. They'll pull the healthy monounsaturated out, and then they'll replace it with sugar, or, they'll use some filler, or like low-fat ice cream with those emulsifiers. Oops, another boo-boo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you got to be careful with that stuff. Oily fish consumption may help prevent blindness in diabetics. That's one more thing. Now, again, take this from the fitness perspective. I think it's suggesting that, you're talking about something that's anti-inflammatory, may help with your carbohydrate metabolism. I know we're not diabetics, but a study published in JAMA Ophthalmology shows that 2 servings of fish a week may lower diabetics' risk factors for blindness, called diabetic retinopathy. So fish oil also in the news, continue, health stuff. Here's another one, again, just shotgun. Gut microbiome may affect dietary compound linked to heart disease. In recent years, scientists have cautioned against eating eggs and meat because these foods generate a common dietary compound, TMAO, that research has suggested plays a role in heart disease. So we've talked about this before. Science Friday did a thing on that last year. What is it? Trimethylamine N oxide, TMAO. Apparently, it's one of those links that you hear about, between meat and heart disease. I don't know. Maybe the anti-meat people just need something else to grab onto, because for the longest time they said, "Oh, it's the cholesterol in meat. Don't eat cholesterol." But the new dietary guidelines dropped cholesterol. You can eat cholesterol in your diet. It's not going to do that much to your blood levels, So, and then one more I'll just toss out here. Resistant starch may reduce metabolic syndrome. Now, 1 in 3 Americans, it used to be 1 in 4, now apparently it's 1 in 3 Americans are pre-diabetic. They metabolize carbs so badly, they eat a high glycemic carbohydrate, they get groggy, sleepy, their blood sugar's not diabetic high, but it's too high. For normal, it's like hovering around 105, something like that, milligrams per deciliter. But it says a study published in Scientific Reports shows that resistant wheat starch may reduce the risk factors associated with metabolic syndrome, including high blood pressure. And I know some of our listeners have high blood pressure, abdominal obesity, elevated fasting blood sugar, and high blood cholesterol and triglycerides. So if you're one of those people you think you're a poor carbohydrate metabolizer, resistant starch may be something for you.
I got one for you.
Yep.
They finished the second round of retesting. WADA did, as far as the Beijing and the London Olympics go. And what is it? 15 more weightlifters.
Oh,
popped.
Ooh.
And for the first time China's showing up. They had 3 show up, which is enough to get them a year ban. But it's looking bad for weightlifting all of a sudden. That's 20 weightlifters so far from Beijing and London that were up high. So they're stripping 6 or 7 gold medals.
That sucks.
They're talking maybe another restructure of weight classes again, because basically the last 2 Olympics are null and void. So
That's
Phil,
awful.
yeah.
what's different? Is it the technology has been bumped
Yeah,
up?
basically their technology got better, so they decided to go back and retest.
Okay.
Because they keep samples up to so many 12 years or something like that. I don't remember.
Mm.
So, yeah, so a bunch more from Russia, Kazakhstan. The first one's from China, so 3 people from China, and like all 3 of them had gold medals.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it's coming back hard, but I was joking with Darrell, a fellow coach, and if they dig deep enough, we might have some medals from those Olympics. If they keep going.
Oh, right.
Move us on up.
Yeah, as the cards fall. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you guys got all the medals. Everybody else was on.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see. It's not looking good. So, but yeah.
Oh man. Well, we've had this discussion before, and I think we should have it periodically, which is maybe it's time. I mean, when such a significant percentage of athletes are testing positive, I don't know. Maybe you just create open divisions. I know that's blasphemous, but
Well, yeah, and my problem is like with the Olympics, anyways. It's supposed to be an amateur sport, but
Not.
it's anything but that. Now.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, everybody taking part of it is a professional. Anybody up there doing it at the high level, their job is their sport. It's not.
Sure.
So, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how this falls down. Hopefully, it doesn't go the way of like what they tried to do with wrestling and just take the whole sport out of the Olympics. But
I think there's some sports that just don't need to be in the Olympics.
Well, I agree.
Yeah,
badminton,
that or just like basketball, golf, and cycling. I mean, they have Tour de France. I mean, every year it brings in millions of dollars. I mean, why do we need basketball, or especially like the NBA guys, in the Olympics? Substitute it with something else. Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. What about like arm wrestling or something like that? That sounds kind of cool. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, grip competitions like Dr. Nelson does. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not any weirder. You're right than some of the stuff that's in there. And you know what too? I don't know how many listeners remember back in the 80s and 90s, but the Weider brothers, Joe and Ben Weider, constantly tried to get bodybuilding in the Olympics, and they really had some limited and mixed success because people like, for example, with the weightlifters, they're used to seeing these behemoths strut out on stage. And let's face it, you don't get behemoths with 3% body fat without drugs, And so I don't know, no offense to the natural bodybuilders that listen, but, at that level, if you're not that much bigger than the people in the crowd, I'm not sure
they're going to be impressed.
Yeah, it's going to be dramatic enough,
Yeah.
But okay. All right, let's go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about certifications for self-improvement.
Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book. But that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks.
Hi, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry, and on behalf of Phil and Rob, I'd just like to let listeners know that if you love us or you hate us, we'd like you to leave a comment or perhaps vote for us on iTunes. It helps us out quite a bit on the popularity side of things. You can also follow Dr. Lowry, me, on Twitter. It's Lawnman7 on Twitter if you want to do that. We also have a Facebook page, the Iron Radio listeners page. So whether it's leaving a comment or voting for us or following us on Twitter or Facebook, that would be fantastic. Also, occasionally Rob or myself will write an article for another website, and Phil will as well. So lots of ways to interact, follow us in other media, and vote for us and keep things going strong on Iron Radio. Thanks.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everyone, we are back. We have Phil Stevens, John Mike, Mary Catherine Powers, and myself, Lonnie Lowry, and we are discussing the topic about of certifications for self-improvement. So a lot of people are familiar with different strength training and weightlifting certifications, usually with the intent, I would argue, to train others, right? But what about picking up one of these things for yourself? Like how much time's involved, what goes into it? So we asked MC to come on because she's got a couple of these current certifications, and I know John Mike has a ton of experience with this, and Phil and I have had different certs over the years too. Let some of them drop by the wayside, stuck with others, whatever. But MC, maybe can you talk about 2 or 3 of the certifications that you either have or you feel like you want, and how they differ?
Sure. One of the most popular ones I think that almost everyone knows about is through the NSCA, so the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Their main certification is the CSCS, so it's the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist certification. So that one, the only requirement is you need a college degree, and you have to be first aid and CPR certified, I believe. And it is a computer test, and there's 2 parts, and one part is the science portion, and the NSCA puts out a book, their Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, I believe, and the test is literally from that book. So the second part of the test is a more practical portion, and there's more training questions, and there's a couple videos, and there's some scenario questions where they give you an example of like a client, and they say give some recommendations on what you would subscribe, and it's all multiple choice. It's all on the computer. So for that test, for self-improvement for listeners or for the general population, like I said, that one has very low requirements. You just need to read the book and take the test. There is some, you have to have some knowledge base, some previous experience a little bit, but that certification is generally pretty easy for the the lay person to go and get. My other certification that I just recently got is more specific to college strength and conditioning. It's through the CSCCA, which is the Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. And it's a very similar certification to the NSCA in some ways. There are 2 parts, just like the NSCA. There's a science portion that is a written test, and the content is very, very similar to the NSCA portion. So one of the recommended study materials for that test is the NSCA's book. The CSCCA is actually putting out their own book in the next year or 2, so that will be more geared toward their written test. And then the second portion, which makes this certification very different, is a practical portion, but you have to do it in person at the annual conference. And you're asked to write a training program for a given sport. So this past year when I took it, it was women's softball. They give you a time of the year, and they give you a 3-week training block, and you have to program everything from warm-up, cool-down, stretching, lifting, speed and agility, any kind of mobility work, anything you want to do for 3 weeks with them. And then you're in front of a board of 3 different coaches, and you have to answer questions about your program, kind of defend your program. And then another portion of that practical exam is a coaching piece. So they say, please demonstrate and explain how you would teach an athlete to power clean. Please demonstrate and explain the bench press. So usually the 3 they do there are clean, bench, and squat. They change it sometimes, but you're given a loaded barbell or a PVC pipe, and you have to go through it in front of 3 coaches, and they ask you questions. And so that, to me, for what I do in a university setting, is a much more valuable certification than the NSCA.
John, I mean, you're heavily involved with the NSCA. Do you have both of those certs, or what are your thoughts about those two?
I have CSCS and I have the CPT, the personal trainer one. And there's a book for each of those certifications, and there's the 2 other certs the NSCA has is the TSAC, or the Tactical Strength and Conditioning. They're in the process. You can take the cert, but they're in the process of creating the first book edition for that. And then the other one is the Special Populations, which I don't feel that that's very necessary for people to get unless you just really just dying to work for special populations. But the ACSM also has their own version for special populations. But I know a lot of people that have the CCA. It's just like MC said, it's a little bit similar to NSCA. The only difference is that NSCA doesn't, you don't go through, speaking to 3 panels of coaches, kind of like a scenario type of thing that she was describing. I kind of like the idea of that. It takes a little bit more time. I also have USAW, and then I just got I got a test out, but I just did my first NKT, or neurokinetic therapy seminar this last weekend, which goes through. It's kind of heavy on the anatomy side, but it talks about facilitation and inhibition of musculature and working in different patterns. So facilitation, muscle that could be, overactive or inhibited, something that's underactive, and how you develop kind of directional and relational patterns, especially when it comes to like hypertonicity of muscle. And a lot of people think, well, things are tight, so I have to stretch them. And I think we're so used to talking like in anatomy, like in just parts, and people don't understand like how everything works in conjunction in terms of systematically. So those are the ones that I have. I want to get my FMS 1, and I think after that I'm going to call it quits on the certs, because when it comes to certs, I mean, the list is kind of endless. But what I really want to say about the certs is, yes, it really depends on what your areas of interest are and what you want to go into. I mean, if you're, sports nutrition, then yes, you need to get, ISSN or get your RD. But I think when it comes to like strength and conditioning certs and like fitness certs, there's over 300 of them nationally.
Right.
And the number one thing that I always tell people is you have to ask yourself and know what is nationally recognized. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the organization like IDEA, International Dance and Exercise, they're based out of San Diego. They used to have certs in the 90s and early 2000s, but they don't have any certs anymore. Like ISSA, started by Dr. Fred Hatfield, Dr. Slot.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they're even in existence anymore, if they even have like any certs.
Well, John, let me ask you this though, because what I really want to get to with this is, which one of these helps you the most? Of the ones you have, as a competitor yourself, which one of these things has some application? Which one of these things do you think is most beneficial to yourself as a competitor?
I think all of them, actually, because they all have different. Because they all have some advantages and disadvantages, and I think they all have value. So I wouldn't say like one is more important because they're all different in some respects. But I think also too is, just like everybody on the show knows, you can have all these certs and still really not know shit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
my point.
We hired a new faculty person, and one of the comments came up because he was being very honest, and he said, I don't have a lot of strength and conditioning experience, and it's sort of on my docket to teach strength conditioning. And someone said, oh, well, he'll just get the NSCA certificate and then he'll be an expert. And I got my face in my hands going, how many people get a driver's license and they shouldn't be on the frickin' road? They're just straight up dangerous. They got a license and they suck. So there's got to be a combination. No, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of education. I overdid it myself. I got the student loans to prove it, but Phil, what do you think? I mean, you've had some and just let them fall away, because after a while, let's face it, I think you get in this sort of jaded,
Yeah, I'm just jaded about the whole industry. I would actually love it if it became mandatory that to just be a coach anywhere in the United States, you had to take a test like the one Mary was just talking about, where you actually had to go prove you knew what the hell you were doing, not just that you can fill out a piece of paper.
And Phil, just to kind of extend on from that, I agree. I think that would be great, but it comes back to the number one thing that really makes the world go round, and that's money.
Yeah, that's all it is.
For sure.
Money.
Right? Yeah.
And the problem is that the average person now can go get some kind of certification over a weekend, and now they can call themselves a coach. And the average population doesn't know the difference in between a freaking CrossFit cert and any other cert.
No, right.
The average person doesn't know what the hell those letters mean behind your name. They just want letters behind your name.
Well, you know what, Phil? Especially like John said, when there's 300 different kinds, some of these are completely full of crap, and other ones have practical components. Like I like what MC said about the one that's only for the collegiate strength coaches, and you almost have to do an oral defense.
Exactly.
Come at you, and you're like, this is how you do it.
And another piece of that, like we talked about before, is mentorship. So another piece of this is you're required to have a college strength and conditioning internship under a certified mentor. So you have to.
Good.
The internship has to be a certain number of hours. So I was a graduate assistant, and that counted as part of my. I mean, obviously as a GI, I spend so many hours, right? So that's part of it, and then you have to defend it. So that certification for what I do is the most. So and when I apply for jobs, it's the CSCS or the collegiate, the specific one that you're required.
Yeah, and there's a give and take. I want to say this because there's a give and take with what you just described, MC, versus kind of like the masses. The give and take, because when you have to go in front of a board and kind of defend, like an oral defense in a sense for a certification, you at the same time you limit your overall kind of enrollment or participation.
Oh, yeah,
but at the same time you kind of raise the standards for yourself or that organization. So it's a give and take, and that's really a fine line to try and master.
We're at that point though where it needs to be limited. Everybody and their grandma is getting some kind. They're literally gas station attendants yesterday, and then they're opening a gym this week. It's horrible.
I will say, and this organization makes it that way on purpose. It's very expensive. It's time consuming, and their standards of passing the oral part are very high. So they make it that way. But like we talked about for the general population, if you just looking to gain education or knowledge or whatever you might be looking for, like the CSCS might be more realistic. Does that make sense?
Okay, even though it might be less defense oriented, right?
Yes, and it's more affordable as well.
To me, it doesn't. Well, it does matter, but the purpose, the fundamental premise of a certification, regardless of what they are, if it's nutrition related, if it's what it doesn't matter what it is, it really just gives you the minimum amount of competency to hopefully not to kill somebody.
Let me pose this, Phil. I mean, because you've seen some come and go, and I want MC and John to chime in on this too, but this takes some thought. But which parts of these certifications are least valuable, right? Because, you said a lot of this can be about money. Everybody's got their own niche. Everybody's got their own angle, But is there something that our listeners would want to avoid, or do you know what I mean?
Well, honestly, the biggest thing I see is that people take something like this. Let's say they go take the ACE test, and they think that's the end all be all, and they're done. They have their cert, and they don't try and learn from there. They don't do what John just said. They don't realize it's the bare minimum.
And they think they should just get a job because they're qualified because they have it. Like you talked about, Lonnie. Like, oh, they're qualified now. No, that in my industry, this is a base requirement to get an interview.
Right.
If you don't have this, I'm not even looking at your resume.
Yes.
But I'm looking at your resume in the stack of hundreds that also have these. So it doesn't set you, in my industry, it doesn't set you apart. You just have to have it.
Yeah, it gets you on the playing field. Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes you a candidate. Maybe.
I would love it if, like with weightlifting, with everything else, I was having this talk with other coaches that are weightlifting coaches, if they would change it to where you have to go intern for a while. And you have to be in a system that's actually working, not just go take a weekend cert, and because anybody can pass that. There's nothing to it. And you can walk out of there. You can literally go to one of these certifications, walk out, and know very little more than when you walked in. And now you can go coach.
Right.
I think one of the most valuable things that anybody can do that most certs, almost all certs, won't provide you, kind of like the what you say, Lonnie, like the least valuable. I think the thing that most certs won't give you is just the overall years and practical training applications that you can get from doing it yourself.
Well, it's a motor skill, right? I mean, if you're going to develop a motor skill, like let's say squat, with good form, or deadlift. I mean, I've been to some of Phil's seminars. Phil's got like on a dry erase or a chalkboard. He's drawing stick figures. He's showing like resistance arms and mechanical advantage. And I mean, a lot of this stuff is, I can see that becoming helpful, but the motor pattern itself, the biological reality is it takes years of practice to build those neuronal pathways and become actually good at it. You know what I mean? As opposed to, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path.
Right.
And I think there's also a difference. I'm sorry to interrupt, but even if you're the best squatter on the planet, being able to teach and coach other people in the squat
it's a different
is the
skill.
skill that I struggle with.
Skill.
Like, I think that's the issue. Just because you can do it and you know how it should be done, or you memorize the book, doesn't mean you can regurgitate the book or the squat or the movement to someone else. And that's where I have the biggest issue. They think they're a coach, but your communication is poor. You don't actually know it in depth enough to teach it, and now you think you're certified. That's where I had.
Right.
You can't read the cues. Like there's a lot of things I would tell students when I taught strength conditioning. I'm like, listen, I'm a physiologist and a nutritionist, but I'm not a coach. Like, coaching is a different major at universities, right? Coaching is its own major, and it's not the same thing as exercise science or exercise physiology. So I'm going to tell you about the physiology of it, but you really need to work under a coach. And I can't, I can't pick up on these cues. Someone like yourself, Phil, or I think all three of you guys are much better at this than I am. But like, I'm most interested in the hypertrophy aspects. Some of these certifications, they don't focus much on that. So I'm wondering why I really should go get one,
because they're a lot of them are performance based.
That's right. No, that's right. But see, I'm also like, I can look at someone and I'm not going to be saying something like, pull with your hamstrings more, or, your hip hinge is mistimed, or you get my point. I really don't know that stuff, and what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
But Lonnie, it goes the other way too, like with the nutrition part. I mean, I wouldn't feel as experienced writing out meal plans for people. Yeah, but there's like thousands of people that don't have nutrition backgrounds that do it fucking all the time.
You know what? And that's what, like,
so it goes both ways, right?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, that's what, like Phil said, it'd be, in a perfect world, if we didn't have a Wild West controlled by money interests, we'd be able to say, here's the level of knowledge you need. Like, there are some licensure type things, like the RD, and licensures are state regulated legalities. That makes them different from a certificate. I think listeners need to know that. But like, for example, I had a strength coach buddy of mine, Ray Eady, and he's up at UW-Madison now, I think. But he's like, Lonnie, don't talk about gluconeogenesis. The basketball players don't care, And so But you get my point. It's like, do we really need to know that from if we do drag nutrition into this? No, we probably don't. And I'm sure there are similar things about acetylcholine vesicles, at the synaptic cleft that a lot of lifters don't give a shit about either. Yeah. So where do you draw the line between practical and the physiology? I am a big fan that you better be able to tell someone, and Phil says this too, is why. Like, why am I doing it like this? But how deep does that rabbit hole go, especially when we're talking about certs for your own personal benefit?
Well, and it's really easy to look at a book and learn this is how something should be done. It's very hard now to take that to 10 to 20 to 40 individuals and get them in those positions.
Agree.
And know the cues to get those different individuals into that correct position, because it's going to be different for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake that a lot of coaches make, is coaching lifts to other people like exactly how they would do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, Phil, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm teaching Phil how to squat, but I'm teaching him in a way that like I squat, not the way he should squat. And that's a huge that just comes with experience.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't mean like 2 years. I mean like 17 or 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you can be doing something, and we've talked about this on the show before, you could be doing something for 10, 15 years and really just not know any different or be doing something wrong.
And to kind of go off of that point, I think that even once you do have experience, coaching is still such a skill that, I mean, you could coach one population like for so long and still not really know how to coach another population. So,
that's a good point.
I work with 7-foot basketball players that need to learn how to squat. And then an hour later, I'm working with a gymnast that needs to learn how to squat. And you can't teach that the same. I can't teach them how I squat because neither of those people are like me. So that's the part that you just don't. You get such a general base from certifications. It's like we said, again, it's a minimum. It's a general understanding, and now you're somewhat ready to kind of go and get experience. That's kind of more my idea of what certifications are.
I
really
agree.
cool.
At least that's food for thought for everyone, I think, for listeners. Like, if you're going to go get a certification yourself, think about some of the different aspects. How much of this is physiology? How much is coaching? How much can you apply to yourself? Read up on them in advance. Talk to people that have the cert. That sort of thing, including the mentorship model. I think it's got to be part of it. It's just got to be part of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Okay, good stuff. Well, we'll see everybody next week.
All right.
All right.
See you next week.
See ya.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry. And they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members.
So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.